Please like and subscribe to the channel if you find this video interesting. Enjoy watching the video. The medical world changed forever in 2023. I remember reading about it in a science magazine, tucked away in the school library, the first successful brain transplant. At 18, I barely registered it beyond a fleeting thought of cool, sci-fi stuff becoming real. My world then was equations, calculus problems that twisted and turned like elegant puzzles, and the comforting hum of a perfectly solved proof. Science was an abstract marvel, something that happened out there, not something that would tear my own reality apart at the seams. By 2026, the procedure had become refined enough. Not common, mind you, but viable. A last resort for those with catastrophic bodily injuries, but intact brain function. It was a whispered miracle for the utterly desperate, a ghost of a chance for those with no other hope. I never, not for 1 second, imagined I would be one of those people. My name is Jeremiah. Or, it was Jeremiah. That name now feels like a whisper from a previous life, a distant echo from a boy I used to be. I was a high school senior, a self-proclaimed math wizard, living a delightfully ordinary life. My biggest excitement was probably deciphering a particularly tricky integral or debating the nuances of string theory with Miss Deborah Harrison, my math teacher. Debbie, as she insisted I call her outside of class, her warm smile crinkling the corners of her eyes. Debbie lived next door to us, a comfortable, slightly older sister figure whom my parents adored. She was more than just a teacher. She was my mentor, my intellectual sparring partner, and a genuine friend. Our discussions weren't confined to the classroom. They spilled over into her cozy living room during tutoring sessions, over my mother's home-cooked dinners, even during casual walks through our quiet suburban neighborhood. She fostered my love for numbers, pushing me gently beyond the curriculum, sharing advanced texts, and introducing me to mathematical concepts that made my brain sing. She saw something in me, a spark that even I hadn't fully recognized, and she nurtured it with an enthusiasm that was infectious. The day it happened, the sky was weeping. A relentless downpour had turned the usually bustling streets into slick, reflective rivers. Our tutoring session had run late, as they often did when we got lost in the elegant logic of a complex problem. I was packing my books, contemplating the miserable walk home, when Debbie's voice cut through the drumming rain against her windowpane. "Jeremiah, would you like a ride home today?" she asked, her voice a warm, melodic current. She stood by the window, her silhouette framed by the gray light, a subtle smile playing on her lips. "It's coming down pretty hard." "That would be great, thanks, Debbie," I replied, grateful. My backpack felt heavier than usual, laden with textbooks and the notes from our latest foray into advanced algebra. I cinched the straps, a mundane action I'd performed thousands of times. It felt utterly insignificant then, a moment of transition from one comfortable space to another. We chatted about the upcoming regional math competition as we drove. The rhythmic swish of the windshield wipers was a hypnotic backdrop to our conversation. I remember laughing at something she said, a dry, witty remark about the physics teacher's penchant for overly dramatic demonstrations. I glanced out the window, watching the blur of raindrops chasing each other down the glass. The streetlights had just begun to glow, casting long, distorted reflections on the wet asphalt. That's the last thing I remember. The laughter, the rain, the glowing streetlights. The next thing was nothing. A void. A deep, silent, suffocating darkness that lasted for what felt like an eternity, but was, in reality, 3 agonizing months. When I finally woke, it wasn't to the familiar ceiling of my bedroom or the scent of my mother's cooking. It was to the sterile white of a hospital room, the faint scent of antiseptic, and a bewildering sense of softness. Everything felt soft. The pristine hospital sheets against what felt like unfamiliar skin. The pillows cradling my head, yielding with an unexpected gentleness. Then came a strange, subtle weight on my chest, a pressure that shifted slightly with each shallow breath. It was disconcerting, a foreign presence I couldn't quite place. I tried to move my hand to investigate, but my limbs felt heavy, disconnected. It was as if I was piloting a new, untested machine, struggling to grasp the controls. A vague, Disorienting thought drifted through the fog of my awakening. This isn't right. This isn't my body. When I finally managed to lift my hand, slowly, painstakingly, the sight of it was a profound shock. The fingers were longer, more slender than my own. The nails were neatly manicured, a subtle, almost translucent pink. This was not the hand of an 18-year-old boy who spent his evenings smudged with pencil lead from frantic calculations. This was elegant, delicate. Whose hand is this? The question screamed in my mind, but my throat felt constricted, dry. I tried to speak, to form words, but only a raspy, unfamiliar sound escaped. I tried again, pushing harder, and this time, a voice emerged. It was higher, softer, undeniably feminine. It was a voice I recognized, yet it was terrifyingly alien coming from my own throat. That's when a nurse, a kind-faced woman with tired eyes, noticed my stirring. Her eyes widened, and a small, hopeful smile touched her lips. She moved quickly, quietly, and within moments, she was calling for a doctor. What followed was the most surreal conversation of my entire life. The doctor, a calm, reassuring presence with intelligent, graying hair, explained everything with gentle precision. The accident. The devastating impact. An out-of-control truck, hydroplaning across the median, a head-on collision that obliterated my old life. Debbie, she explained, had suffered severe whiplash, damaging her neurological system beyond repair. Brain dead. Her body, however, remained remarkably unharmed. A cruel twist of fate. I, on the other hand, had taken the full brunt of the physical trauma. My body was crushed, irreparably damaged. But my brain, though plunged into a coma, had fought to survive. It was a miracle, they called it. A fighter's spirit. My parents, desperate, heartbroken, were presented with an unprecedented option. A last resort. Transplant my brain into Debbie's body. As a registered organ donor, Debbie had consented to help others after her death. Though this particular scenario was surely not what she had envisioned, the legal framework, stretched and reinterpreted, allowed for it. Faced with the unimaginable choice between losing me entirely or giving me a chance at life, albeit in a radically different form, they chose life. "You're the first teenage patient to undergo this procedure," the doctor said, her voice soft but firm, conveying both wonder and the immense weight of the situation. "Your recovery so far has been remarkable, Jeremiah." My parents arrived shortly after, their faces a breathtaking mixture of profound relief and an almost palpable apprehension. My mother, bless her heart, broke down in tears the moment she saw my conscious eyes. She rushed to the bedside, carefully, tentatively, hugging this new, fragile vessel that contained her son. My father, typically stoic, stood back, his emotions warring on his face. He was clearly overjoyed, but utterly unsure how to interact with this new, unrecognizable version of his child. "We couldn't lose you," my mother whispered, her voice thick with unshed tears, her hand stroking what was now Debbie's hair. "We just couldn't." They filled in the gaps in my memory, painting a vivid, horrifying picture of the accident, the agonizing days of waiting, and the impossible decision they'd been forced to make. The doctor then delivered another shock, explaining that I had a choice regarding my legal identity. I could register as Jeremiah in a new body, or I could continue living as Deborah Harrison. The world tilted. My brain, Jeremiah's brain, struggled to comprehend. Jeremiah in Debbie's body? Or Debbie, who was actually Jeremiah? The implications were staggering, a labyrinth of legal, social, and deeply personal complexities. I need time to think," I managed to say, the unfamiliar voice still startling me with every utterance. "Of course," the doctor assured me, her gaze sympathetic. "There's no rush. Take all the time you need." My mother, ever practical, had brought some clothes for me. Items from Debbie's wardrobe, retrieved from her house next door. The nurse, sensing my growing distress, gently helped me to the bathroom for my first proper look at myself. Standing before the full-length mirror, I felt a shock so profound I still struggle to adequately describe it. The face looking back at me was undeniably familiar, but it was not my own. It was Debbie's face. The same warm eyes that had patiently guided me through difficult equations, the same subtle curve of lips that smiled encouragingly when I succeeded. But now, those warm eyes stared back with my own confusion, my own fear, my own raw, overwhelming disbelief. My gaze traveled downward, taking in the hospital gown, then what lay beneath it. The unfamiliar weight on my chest, the one that had perplexed me upon waking, was, of course, breasts. They weren't particularly large, but they were definitely there, a constant, undeniable presence I was utterly unused to. And further down, well, the absence of what should have been there, and the presence of what was there instead, was perhaps the most alien sensation of all. It was a chasm of understanding, a sudden, terrifying realization of the irreversible transformation. The nurse, bless her for her quiet patience, helped me dress in the clothes my mother had brought. Soft cotton underwear that felt strange against my new skin. A comfortable blue t-shirt that settled loosely over my new contours. Gray tracksuit pants. Just putting on the bra was an ordeal, a foreign garment I had no experience with, its straps and cups a bewildering puzzle. Each movement, each adjustment, was a stark reminder of the monumental shift in my existence. Jeremiah was gone. Deborah Harrison was here. And I was both, and neither, simultaneously. The next few days were a blur of new sensations, constant challenges, and a relentless assault on my former understanding of myself. It was a crash course in being a woman, in navigating a body that felt both utterly alien and strangely intimate. Physical therapy sessions were grueling, not because I was weak, but because my proprioception, my body's sense of its own position and movement, was completely off. The proportions were different. The center of gravity, once familiar, was now subtly lower, demanding a conscious recalibration for every step, every turn. Muscles I never knew existed twinged and protested, configured in ways that defied my ingrained male memory. Simple tasks like walking in a straight line, reaching for a glass, or even just standing upright without swaying, required immense concentration. My brain, Jeremiah's brain, was trying to command a body that had its own muscle memory, its own inherent grace, all of which were utterly foreign to me. Just let the body lead, Jeremiah, my physical therapist, a robust woman named Sarah, would advise, her voice firm but kind. She didn't know the truth, of course. To her, I was Deborah Harrison, recovering from a terrible accident. Don't fight it so much. Your muscles know what to do. Your brain just needs to learn to trust them again. But how could I trust them when they weren't my muscles? When every flex and extension felt like a stranger's act. I'd stand in front of the parallel bars, pushing myself to mimic Sarah's movements, feeling like a puppet whose strings were being pulled by an invisible, confused puppeteer. My parents visited daily, a consistent anchor in my tumultuous new reality. My mother, with her endless practicality, brought more of Debbie's clothes, gradually replacing the drab hospital gowns with items that spoke of a life lived. She'd hold up blouses and skirts, her eyes searching mine for a flicker of recognition, a sign that the sun she knew was still in there. "You look lovely in this color, dear," she said one day, holding up a moss green jumper against my chest. "It brings out the warmth in your eyes." It was a strange, almost unsettling intimacy. Moments of mother-daughter bonding that I had never expected to experience. She would patiently show me how to style my new, longer hair, Debbie's hair, demonstrating with deft fingers how to use the various products that had once filled Debbie's bathroom. Conditioners, serums, curling irons. A whole new vocabulary of feminine rituals. I watched her reflection in the mirror, a spectral image of my mother instructing a version of her friend, while inside, Jeremiah struggled to reconcile the image with his own identity. It felt like playing dress-up in someone else's skin, a charade I was forced to perform even for the people who knew the truth. My father, typically more reserved, approached this new dynamic with a quiet, almost awkward grace. He didn't offer advice on fashion or hair. Instead, he brought books. Heavy tomes on advanced mathematics, remembering how Debbie and I had shared that passion. He'd sit by my bedside, or later, by the small table in my hospital room, and we would work through problems together, just like before. He'd point to a particularly elegant proof, his brow furrowed in concentration, and ask, "What do you think, Jeremiah? Is there a more efficient way to approach this?" It was his way of showing me that some things hadn't changed. That beneath the startlingly different exterior, I was still his child, his math wizard, regardless of my outward appearance. Those moments, surrounded by the familiar language of numbers, were precious islands of normalcy in an ocean of strangeness. They were the only times I truly felt like Jeremiah again, unburdened by the unfamiliar curves and soft voice. As the days turned into weeks, the medical team continued their assessments. My brain activity was robust, my cognitive functions intact, even enhanced by the sheer volume of new information it was processing. Psychologically, it was a different story. The sessions with Dr. Albright, a kind, elderly psychiatrist specializing in identity trauma, were intense. We talked for hours about body dysphoria, phantom limb sensations, the ghostly ache of male genitalia that no longer existed, and the profound grief for a life lost, intertwined with the confusing gratitude for a life saved. It's like a dual consciousness, isn't it? Dr. Albright mused one afternoon, her gaze steady. Jeremiah's mind, overlaid onto Deborah's body, and in a way, her former existence. "It's like I'm a cover version of a song," I replied, the metaphor surprising even myself. "The tune is the same, but the singer, the instrument, it's entirely different. And you have to learn to sing it," she nodded. "In your own way." The decision about my legal identity loomed large. Jeremiah in a new body or Deborah Harrison. The hospital staff referred to me as Deborah. My parents, in the quiet solitude of our visits, still used Jeremiah. The world outside, the world I was preparing to re-enter, knew only Deborah Harrison. By the time I was cleared to leave the hospital, a new sense of resolve had begun to form. It wasn't an easy decision, but it felt like the only one that made sense. I would continue living as Deborah Harrison. The legal arrangements were complex, but thanks to the foresight of the doctors and the sheer determination of my parents, manageable. My parents were registered as Debbie's next of kin, effectively becoming her parents on paper. To the world, Jeremiah had died in the accident, and Debbie had survived. Only the doctor in charge of my case, a few government officials who handled the unprecedented paperwork, my parents, and I knew the truth. It felt like stepping into a deeply intricate, high-stakes espionage mission, where my own identity was the biggest secret. Moving into Debbie's house felt both strange and intimately familiar. I had visited many times before, had spent countless hours in her living room, her kitchen, her study. But living there was different. Her clothes now filled the wardrobe, hanging like silent sentinels of a life interrupted. Her books lined the shelves, an impressive collection of mathematical texts, classical literature, and unexpected sci-fi novels. Her toiletries occupied the bathroom, a dizzying array of lotions and potions. It was like stepping into someone else's life, which, in a very real and profound sense, I had. Every object, every scent, was a reminder of the woman whose body I now inhabited, a constant presence that was both comforting and unsettling. "We're just next door if you need anything, dear," my mother assured me, her voice a little too bright, a little too strained. "Anything at all. Don't hesitate." "I know, Mom," I replied, the words feeling foreign as they left Debbie's lips. I was still getting used to calling her Mom with this voice, this face. It felt like a betrayal, yet also a profound necessity. "I'll be okay." That first night alone in Debbie's house was a crucible. The silence of the familiar, yet suddenly alien, space pressed in on me. The scent of her life, a faint whisper of lavender and old paper, was everywhere. I stood in front of the full-length mirror in Debbie's bedroom, slowly, deliberately, removing the comfortable outfit I had worn home from the hospital. Each button, each zipper, each soft swathe of fabric peeling away, revealed more of the new me. The body revealed was undeniably female. Curves and contours that still felt alien to me. The breasts, modestly sized but perky, with small pink tips that seemed to respond to the cool air of the room, were now mine. The waist curved inward, the hips outward, sketching the classic feminine hourglass. I turned, examining my new self from different angles, a dispassionate scientist studying a specimen. The back view was equally unfamiliar, with rounded buttocks and the cascading fall of Debbie's shoulder-length hair. Down under, between my legs, was the most foreign territory of all. I hadn't fully explored that area yet, still too uncomfortable, too overwhelmed by the stark reality of what had changed. It was a wound that refused to heal, a constant, silent scream of absence. I pulled on the pajamas my mother had laid out for me, a silk set in a muted rose, something Debbie would have worn. The fabric slid cool and smooth against my new skin, a sensation both luxurious and unsettling. Then I crawled into Debbie's bed, now my bed, and tried to process the surreal, impossible turn my life had taken. The soft mattress, the faint scent of her perfume on the pillow, it was like sleeping inside a memory, a ghost of a life that was now mine to inhabit. The silence stretched, vast and echoing, punctuated only by the frantic beat of Jeremiah's heart within Deborah's chest. The enormity of it all threatened to swallow me whole. The next few weeks were a crash course in being a woman, a steep learning curve that dwarfed even the most complex mathematical equations I had ever encountered. My mother became an invaluable, if sometimes over-enthusiastic, guide. She'd bring over bags of cosmetics, explaining the arcane rituals of makeup application, foundation, concealer, blush, mascara, eyeshadow. Each item was a tiny, intricate puzzle, a brushstroke in a portrait I was slowly learning to paint. Just a little dab here, sweetheart, she'd instruct, dabbing a tiny bit of liquid foundation onto my cheek with a gentle finger to even out your skin tone. And then blend, blend, blend. I'd sit at Debbie's vanity, staring at my reflection, Debbie's reflection, as my mother transformed the familiar features into something subtly different. It felt like putting on a mask, a performance for the world, a necessary shield. I studied the subtle differences in the way my face moved when I smiled with lipstick, or the way my eyes seemed to deepen with a touch of eyeliner. It was all a language I was just beginning to decode. Then there was the far more intimate, often bewildering, aspect of feminine hygiene. My mother approached these conversations with a gentle, matter-of-fact tone, but for me, they were profoundly disorienting. She explained things about the female anatomy, about cycles and products that I, as Jeremiah, had only ever heard about in the abstract from a male perspective. It was information presented with an almost clinical detachment in biology class, now delivered with an intimate, maternal warmth. The first menstrual cycle hit me like a truck. I had read about it, of course, in the various informational pamphlets my mother had quietly left around the house. But knowledge was utterly inadequate preparation for the visceral reality. The cramps were a deep, agonizing ache in my lower abdomen, a pain completely unlike anything I had experienced as a male. It wasn't the sharp, localized pain of a sports injury. It was a pervasive, internal throb that radiated outwards, sapping my energy and focus. The emotional turbulence that accompanied it was equally baffling, a roller coaster of irritability and inexplicable sadness. How do you deal with this every month? I groaned, curled up on the sofa with a hot water bottle pressed to my belly, feeling utterly miserable. My voice, Debbie's voice, was strained with discomfort. My mother, ever sympathetic, sat beside me and handed me a glass of water and 2 painkillers. "You get used to it, honey," she said, her hand gently stroking my hair. "Your body learns to manage. But it never gets fun." She gave a wry smile. "Welcome to womanhood, I guess." Clothing was another frontier to conquer. Debbie's wardrobe was extensive, practical, but undeniably feminine, full of comfortable yet stylish options. I started with the simplest items: comfortable sweaters, loose blouses, and well-fitting jeans. Gradually, I began to venture into more distinctly feminine pieces. Each garment felt like a costume at first, an uncomfortable shell I was forcing myself into. The first time I wore a skirt, I spent ages in front of the full-length mirror, adjusting the fabric, watching how it swayed and moved when I walked. It felt oddly freeing around my legs after a lifetime of trousers, a strange liberation in the unfamiliar air. Yet, it also made me feel exposed, vulnerable in a way I hadn't anticipated. It was an exercise in external validation, ensuring I looked the part, even if I didn't feel it internally. "You look nice," my father commented awkwardly one evening when I wore it to dinner at their house. It was one of the few direct acknowledgments he had made of my new appearance, a small but significant gesture. His gaze lingered for a moment, then quickly shifted, as if he found it difficult to reconcile the image with the son he knew. "Thanks, Dad," I replied, a rush of unexpected gratitude washing over me. His effort, however small, meant the world. It was a lifeline, a reminder that despite everything, his love was constant. Beyond the personal adjustments, there was a significant hurdle looming, preparing to return to work as Debbie. As a math teacher with tenure, her position was secure. And given my own aptitude for the subject, I was confident I could handle the academic aspects. The thought of stepping back into a classroom, however, filled me with a nervous dread. The social dynamics, the performance of being Deborah Harrison, the beloved math teacher, were another matter entirely. I spent hours practicing in front of the mirror, studying old photos of Debbie, adopting her mannerisms as best I could remember them. The way she tucked her hair behind her ear when she was deep in thought. The slight tilt of her head when listening patiently to a student's question. Her warm, professional smile that conveyed both authority and approachability. I replayed conversations in my head, imagining how Debbie would respond, what inflections she would use. I even practiced writing her signature, painstakingly mimicking the elegant script until it felt natural, until it was natural. "I can do this," I told my reflection one evening, my voice a determined whisper. "I can do this for both of us." That phrase became something of a mantra. Because, in a way, I was living for two people now. I had been given this second chance at life through Debbie's body, and I felt a profound, almost spiritual responsibility to honor her by living well in it. It wasn't just my life anymore. It was a continuation, a stewardship. The night before I was due to return to teaching, I stood before the mirror again, this time dressed in one of Debbie's favorite outfits. It was a forest green blouse with subtle gold threading, paired with a soft white skirt that fell just below the knee. The colors complemented my new skin tone and eyes, and the fit was flattering without being too tight. It was an outfit that projected competence and kindness, exactly what I hoped to embody. "What do you think?" I asked aloud, imagining I was speaking to Debbie herself, a silent presence in the room. "Do I look like a proper teacher now?" I adjusted the bead necklace at my throat, a simple pendant that Debbie had worn often, its cool weight a grounding presence. "I want you to know," I continued, feeling only slightly foolish for talking to a mirror, for talking to a ghost, "that I'm grateful for this life you've given me. I promise I'll live it well for both of us. I'll take care of your students, your home, your body." I took a deep breath, straightening my posture the way Debbie always did when gathering her confidence, a subtle lift of the shoulders, a gentle squaring of the chin. "You were like an older sister to me, and now I guess we're closer than anyone could have imagined. I'll make you proud. I promise." As I turned away from the mirror, a peculiar sensation washed over me. A warm presence, a faint whisper of approval, as if Debbie was somehow there, watching over me, giving her blessing. It was probably just my imagination, a comfort my mind created to help me cope with the staggering strangeness of my situation. But it felt real. And that, in the deepening twilight of Debbie's bedroom, was enough. Tomorrow, I would step back into the world as Deborah Harrison. The students, my former peers, would see their familiar math teacher, unaware that behind those warm, intelligent eyes was a different consciousness, a former student now navigating a new existence. It wouldn't be easy. Nothing about this journey had been easy. But I was alive. I had been given a second chance that few would ever experience. A new body, a new perspective, a new life. And I was determined to make the most of it. The echoes of Jeremiah might still linger, but the voice of Deborah Harrison would be the one to guide me forward. The first day back at Northwood High School as Deborah Harrison was an exercise in controlled panic. I'd meticulously chosen the forest green blouse and white skirt, a deliberate echo of my pledge to Debbie's reflection. The bead necklace felt like a talisman. Stepping out of my Debbie's car in the faculty parking lot, the familiar scent of asphalt and autumn leaves hit me, sparking a pang of Jeremiah's nostalgia. This was my school, my world, yet I was entering it as a ghost, a stranger in a familiar setting. My walk down the hallway was a carefully choreographed performance. I held my head high, a slight smile on my lips, greeting colleagues with a confident nod that belied the frantic drumming of my heart. They offered sympathetic smiles and warm welcomes, relieved to see Debbie back after her accident. Each "welcome back, Deborah" felt like a tiny chisel chipping away at Jeremiah's remnants, cementing the new identity. The math department office was a haven and a trap. It smelled of old paper, dry erase markers, and stale coffee. Colleagues I'd known for years as Jeremiah's teachers now greeted me as their peer, their colleague. Mr. Henderson, the notoriously gruff history teacher, actually gave me a pat on the shoulder. "Good to have you back, Harrison. Math department felt a little less intelligent without you." I managed a soft laugh, Debbie's laugh, and thanked him. The sheer effort of maintaining the facade was exhausting, a constant internal monologue of self-correction. Walk like her. Talk like her. Think like her. My classroom, room 204, was exactly as I remembered it. The periodic table on one wall, a poster detailing the Pythagorean theorem on another. My desk, now her desk, sat at the front, stacked with textbooks and a half-finished cup of coffee that a kind colleague must have placed there. I took a deep breath, the scent of chalk dust and old textbooks filling my lungs. This was it. The moment of truth. The bell rang, a jarring clang that echoed through the hallways. Footsteps approached, a cacophony of adolescent energy. The first students filtered in, a mix of freshmen and sophomores for my Algebra I class. They settled into their seats, some offering quiet, good mornings, others just curious stares. They had known Miss Harrison. They had heard about the accident. They were looking for confirmation that she was back. Then, the door opened, and a familiar face walked in. Michael. My best friend. He was a junior now, a year below where I should have been. He paused, his eyes scanning the classroom, and then he saw me. He offered a polite, respectful nod, the kind a student gives a teacher. "Morning, Miss Harrison," he mumbled, heading to his usual seat in the second row. A spear of pain lanced through my chest. Michael. My friend. He didn't know. He couldn't know. I wanted to call out his name, to tell him everything, to embrace him and confess the impossible truth. But the words died in my throat, replaced by a professional smile. Debbie would smile. Debbie would nod. "Good morning, Michael," I replied, my voice steady, betraying none of the turmoil within. The rest of the class was a blur. I taught with an automatic precision, my mathematical mind taking over, relishing the familiarity of numbers and proofs. It was a relief to retreat into the objective world of algebra, where identity didn't matter, only logic. Yet, every time I caught Michael's eye, a flicker of something unreadable in his gaze, I felt a deep, aching loneliness. He was right there, but miles away. The days morphed into weeks. The routine became a comfortable, if artificial, rhythm. I graded papers, held office hours, and even joined in faculty meetings, offering insights with Debbie's practiced grace. The students, once wary, began to relax around me. They laughed at my Debbie's dry humor, asked questions with earnest curiosity, and sought my guidance with the complex problems. I was good at this. I was good at being Debbie. Too good, perhaps. The distinction between Jeremiah and Deborah began to blur in unexpected ways. Sometimes, when explaining a particularly elegant solution, I would feel a genuine spark of Debbie's passion, a resonance that went beyond mere imitation. Her memories, subtly integrated into my brain during the transplant, would surface. A particular teaching technique, a favorite analogy, a specific anecdote about a previous student. They felt like my memories, yet I knew they weren't. It was like inheriting a vast, comprehensive library, and slowly, I was starting to believe I had written some of the books myself. One afternoon, a few weeks into the semester, I was walking through the science wing, heading to the main office. The corridor was mostly empty, save for a few straggling students. Suddenly, I heard my old name, sharp and clear. Jeremiah. I froze, my blood turning to ice. My head snapped around. Standing a few feet away, leaning against a locker, was Sarah, a girl from my old AP physics class. She was a quiet, observant girl, brilliant in her own right, with whom I'd shared more than a few late-night study sessions at the library. Her eyes, wide and searching, were fixed directly on me. My mind raced. No, impossible. No one knew. My parents, the doctors, a few officials. Sarah couldn't know. I forced a polite, teacherly smile onto my face, preparing to say something like, "Excuse me, do I know you?" But Sarah didn't waver. She pushed off the locker, her posture radiating a strange mixture of fear and conviction. "Miss Harrison, it's you, isn't it?" "Jeremiah." My breath hitched. The carefully constructed facade, the weeks of meticulous performance, threatened to shatter into a million pieces. How could she possibly know? I felt a cold dread seep into my bones. This was the first real crack in my new identity, a plot twist I had never anticipated. And Sarah, of all people, the quiet, unassuming physics prodigy, was the one to find it. I swallowed, my throat dry. I don't know what you're talking about, Sarah, I said, trying to maintain Debbie's calm, authoritative tone, but my voice wavered slightly at the end. Sarah took a step closer, her eyes boring into mine, bypassing the feminine features, searching for the boy she knew. "I saw you," she whispered, her voice low and urgent. "Before the accident. In the car. And then. I saw her in the hospital." The face was hers, but the eyes are yours, Jeremiah. I know it. My mind spun. Before the accident? How could she have seen me? And what did she mean, she saw her in the hospital? Debbie had been brain dead. Had she seen my brain being prepared? No, that was impossible. "Sarah, you must be mistaken," I tried again, my voice a little firmer this time, an attempt to regain control. "Miss Harrison was in a terrible accident, but she recovered." I recovered. "No," Sarah insisted, shaking her head slowly. Her gaze was intense, unwavering. "It's the math, Jeremiah. The way you solve problems. The insights. Debbie was good, but you were a genius. And the other day in class, you explained the Cauchy-Riemann equations in a way you always did, a subtle point that only you and I ever talked about." She paused, her voice dropping even lower. "And then I saw the scar." My hand flew to the back of my neck, where the surgical scar from the brain transplant was carefully concealed by Debbie's hair. It was a faint, thin line, barely visible, but it was there. My blood ran cold. "How did you?" I started, but Sarah cut me off, her eyes filled with a desperate plea. "I overheard a nurse in the waiting room talking about an unprecedented procedure and a teenager who was a miracle. And then I remembered you and Debbie were in the crash. I put it together. You're him, aren't you?" The jig was up. The truth, painstakingly buried, was now exposed, and by a student, no less. My carefully constructed life as Deborah Harrison threatened to crumble around me. My mind raced, frantically searching for an answer, a denial, anything. But looking into Sarah's determined eyes, I knew it was useless. She was too smart, too observant. She saw me. The real me. "Yes," I finally whispered, the word barely audible. It was a surrender, an admission. "It's me, Sarah. But you cannot tell anyone." "No one." Sarah's face softened slightly, a flicker of relief mixed with profound wonder. "I knew it," she said, almost to herself. "I just knew it." She looked around the empty corridor, then back at me, her gaze full of a complex mix of emotions. "But what are you going to do now, Jeremiah?" I had no idea. This was a variable I hadn't accounted for, a wrench thrown into the most delicate of equations. My new life, built on a foundation of secrecy, was now threatened. And Sarah, my unexpected confidant, held the key to its unraveling. This wasn't just about maintaining a facade for colleagues and students anymore. This was about survival. What would this mean for me? For my parents? For Debbie's legacy? The questions swirled in my mind, a chaotic maelstrom threatening to overwhelm me. This unexpected encounter had just changed everything. The corridor suddenly felt impossibly long, the silence between Sarah and me deafening. My yes hung in the air, a fragile admission that threatened to shatter the carefully constructed reality around us. Sarah's initial relief gave way to a look of intense seriousness. She understood the gravity of the situation, the implicit threat that this secret held. "I won't tell anyone," she said, her voice firm, cutting through my internal panic. "I promise, Jeremiah." "But why? Why what?" I asked, my voice still a whisper, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. "Why go through all this? Why live as her?" She gestured vaguely around the school. "Why not just be you?" The question was simple, yet incredibly complex. It forced me to articulate the rationale behind a choice that had become my very existence. It was the only way, I explained, leading her to a quieter corner near a rarely used stairwell. My body, it was too damaged. Debbie's was intact. And the legal system, it was simpler to assume Debbie survived. For my parents, for everyone. Jeremiah died in the crash. Sarah listened, her brow furrowed in concentration, her bright eyes absorbing every word. "So, you just disappeared?" Effectively, I nodded, running a hand through Debbie's hair, a gesture I was slowly becoming accustomed to. "I'm Deborah Harrison now. Legally, socially, physically. Only my parents and a few others know the truth." "And me," Sarah added, a hint of awe in her voice. "This is unbelievable. Like something out of a movie." "It's my life," I retorted, a flicker of my old irritation surfacing. "And it's a secret that could ruin everything. For me, for my parents. For Debbie's memory. You have to understand that, Sarah." She nodded solemnly. "I do. I really do. You don't have to worry about me." "But what now?" She looked at me, a strange mix of curiosity and concern. "Are you okay? Like, mentally?" "As okay as I can be," I admitted, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. "It's an adjustment. Everything. The body, the emotions, the way people treat you. It's like learning a whole new operating system." I paused, then looked at her. "You're the only person, outside of my immediate family, who knows. That means you're the only person I can truly talk to about this." A flicker of something, pride, crossed Sarah's face. "I can handle it, Jeremiah. I mean, Miss Harrison. Whatever you want me to call you when we're alone." "Debbie is fine," I said, deciding on a middle ground that felt less jarring than Jeremiah and more practical than Miss Harrison. Or Jeremiah, if you prefer. When no one else is around. Over the next few weeks, our interactions took on a new, clandestine dimension. Sarah became my secret confidant, an unlikely anchor in my bewildering new reality. We started meeting after school, ostensibly for extra math help, but our conversations quickly delved deeper. She helped me process things I couldn't share with my parents, who were already carrying such a heavy burden. "Does it feel weird?" she asked one day as we sat in my, Debbie's, classroom after hours, the setting sun casting long shadows. "Being a woman?" I sighed, leaning back in Debbie's swivel chair. "Weird doesn't even begin to cover it. It's like my brain is constantly trying to correct for a body that doesn't match its internal blueprint. Phantom sensations, unexpected emotional responses. And the social stuff. I never realized how differently men and women are treated until I experienced it from this side." I told her about the subtle shifts in conversation, the way some male colleagues spoke to me now, sometimes dismissing my input or explaining things in a patronizing tone that would have earned a sharp rebuke from male Jeremiah. I recounted the discomfort of navigating a world suddenly aware of my physical form in a way I hadn't been before. "It's like I have to perform being a woman," I explained, on top of performing being Debbie. "It's exhausting." Sarah listened intently, her intelligent eyes rarely leaving my face. "It's like you're a double agent," then she observed, a slight smile playing on her lips. "Living two lives, pretending to be someone you're not, pretending to be a gender you're not. That must be incredibly isolating." Her words resonated deeply. Isolating. That was the perfect word. Despite being surrounded by people, I had never felt more alone. The weight of the secret, the constant vigilance, the inability to truly be myself with anyone, was a heavy burden. You have no idea, I admitted. Which is why I'm so grateful you know, Sarah. I actually have someone to talk to about it. Sarah became more than just a confidant. She became my co-conspirator. She helped me observe Debbie's mannerisms more acutely, pointing out subtle inconsistencies she noticed. Debbie used to tap her pen on her chin when she was thinking. She'd say, "Not just hold it." It was a distinctive gesture. Or, when you get excited about a math problem, you still use Jeremiah's exact facial expression for intense focus. Debbie was more serene. It was a strange form of reverse mentorship, a student teaching her teacher how to be herself. And through these observations, I began to piece together a more complete picture of who Deborah Harrison truly was, beyond the surface-level memories my brain had absorbed. I realized I didn't just have to mimic her, I had to understand her. One evening, after another intense tutoring session, Sarah looked at me, her expression thoughtful. "Jeremiah," she began, using my old name, "do you ever wonder about the accident?" My blood ran cold again. "What do you mean?" "The truck," she said, her voice hushed. "Hydroplaned. Head on. It was a pretty specific type of accident. And you and Debbie were the only ones involved." She paused, her eyes wide. "What if it wasn't an accident?" My heart gave a jolt. "What are you suggesting, Sarah? That someone deliberately tried to kill us?" The idea was preposterous, yet a seed of unease took root. Jeremiah, the math wizard, lived a quiet life. Debbie was a beloved teacher. Who would want to harm either of us? "I don't know," she admitted, "but my dad is a detective. He always says there are no coincidences in life, especially not with a collision that precise." She looked at me, her gaze piercing. "And you and Debbie were together in that car. Two people with a shared passion for advanced mathematics. And now one of you is gone and the other is you." A chilling thought struck me. Debbie's neurological damage, my severe physical trauma, yet her body was relatively intact. Was that just random chance? Or was it designed? My scientific mind recoiled from the implication, but the mathematician in me, the one who loved to look for patterns and anomalies, couldn't dismiss it entirely. "That's a wild theory, Sarah," I said, trying to sound dismissive, but my voice lacked conviction. "Is it?" she countered, rising to pace the classroom. "Think about it. Debbie was a brilliant mathematician. You're a brilliant mathematician. What if someone wanted access to her work? Or yours? And this was a way to get rid of Jeremiah and get someone else in Debbie's body, someone who wouldn't be missed, but who could potentially access things." My mind reeled. This wasn't just about identity anymore. This was about danger. A cold dread, far deeper than the fear of exposure, began to settle in. Was my new life not just a second chance, but also a pawn in some darker game? The idea was terrifying, but it explained the inexplicable. The almost surgical precision of the damage, leaving a brain intact but destroying the body, while the other body was largely fine, but the brain destroyed. It was too convenient. "We need to be careful, Sarah," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "Very careful. If there's something to this, then whoever did it, they might still be watching." The comfortable routine I had built, the fragile peace I had found in my new identity, suddenly felt like a house of cards in a hurricane. Sarah's observation hadn't just exposed my secret, it had opened a terrifying new chapter, transforming my story from a personal journey of identity into a potential thriller. We were no longer just student and teacher or secret confidants. We were detectives, unknowingly stepping into a dangerous game. The bells of Northwood High had never sounded so ominous. Sarah's theory, once dismissed as outlandish, gnawed at me. The mathematician in me, trained to spot anomalies and hidden patterns, couldn't shake the unsettling feeling. A hydroplaning truck, precise damage, too neat. The idea that Jeremiah's death and Debbie's survival, in a new, complicated form, might not have been accidental became a chilling undercurrent to my daily life. How would we even begin to investigate this? I asked Sarah a few days later, after school. We were in the quiet solitude of the school library, surrounded by dusty tomes, a setting that felt both academic and conspiratorial. "My dad always said to look for what doesn't fit," Sarah replied, pushing a stray strand of hair behind her ear. "And start with the records. The accident report, the police investigation." But I can't just walk into the police station as Deborah Harrison and ask to see the accident report for Jeremiah and Deborah, I pointed out. That would raise too many questions. Sarah grinned, a spark of mischievous brilliance in her eyes. You don't have to. I can get my dad to pull it. He won't question it if I say it's for a school project on traffic safety or something. He knows Miss Harrison was involved. It'll make sense. The next week was a tense waiting game. Sarah finally came to my classroom after school, a thick, official-looking envelope clutched in her hand. Her face was pale, her usual composure replaced by a tight knot of apprehension. Here it is, she whispered, handing me the envelope. The accident report. And something else. I opened the envelope, my fingers trembling slightly. The official language of the police report was stark and impersonal, detailing the date, time, location, and the alleged cause, driver error, hydroplaning on wet roads. But then I saw the something else. It was a separate, smaller report, tucked behind the main one. A vehicle maintenance record for the truck involved. My dad's friend in the motor vehicles department pulled this for him when he mentioned the accident, Sarah explained, her voice barely audible. He thought it was odd. The truck was a relatively new model, meticulously maintained. Last service check just 3 days before the accident. No reported issues with tires or braking system. Hydroplaning is possible, of course, but for a truck of that caliber, with brand new tires. She trailed off, letting the implication hang in the air. My eyes scanned the maintenance report, my mathematician's brain instantly searching for discrepancies. No, everything seemed in order. Too in order, perhaps. It felt too perfect, a clean slate designed to dismiss any suspicion. And then there's this, Sarah continued, her voice even lower. She pulled out a small, printed photograph, not from the official report, but clearly a personal snapshot. It was a blurry image, taken from a distance, of the accident scene, before the emergency services had fully arrived. Amidst the twisted metal of my old car and the larger truck, I could just make out a figure, standing discreetly near the edge of the scene, observing. It was a man, indistinct in the distance, wearing a dark raincoat and a wide-brimmed hat, his face obscured. He wasn't a first responder, nor did he seem to be a civilian passerby rubbernecking. He was just watching. Who is that? I breathed, a sudden chill running through me. That's what my dad's friend asked, Sarah replied. He found this on an old phone of a witness who took some photos. The witness said the man left before the police arrived. He described him as creepy and out of place. This was it. Concrete evidence that the accident might not have been accidental. A meticulously maintained truck, a mysterious observer. My mind, now infused with Debbie's cautious wisdom, began to connect the dots. This wasn't just a random act, it was orchestrated. We need to find out who this man is, I stated, my voice firm with a newfound resolve. And who would benefit from Jeremiah being dead and Debbie being available. The investigation began in earnest, conducted in secret after school, under the guise of math club. We started by looking into Debbie's life. Had she been working on anything sensitive? Any groundbreaking research that might have attracted unwanted attention? I started systematically going through Debbie's old files in her home office. Her lesson plans, her academic papers, correspondence. Most of it was standard academic material. But then, tucked away in a locked drawer, behind a stack of old conference pamphlets, I found a series of cryptic notes. They weren't mathematical equations in the traditional sense, but complex algorithms, diagrams of neural networks, and coded references to Project Chimera. Chimera, Sarah mused when I showed her the notes during one of our secret meetings in Debbie's classroom. Like the mythological beast? Or a scientific experiment, I suggested, my mind racing. A combination of different genetic materials. In a neurological context, brain research. The notes hinted at a clandestine research group, highly secretive, focused on advanced neurological interfacing and, more disturbingly, brain mapping and consciousness transfer. There were references to ethical dilemmas, to pushing the boundaries of what was considered acceptable. Debbie had been involved. Deeply involved. This is big, Jeremiah, Sarah whispered, her eyes wide. Debbie wasn't just a math teacher. She was involved in something profound and dangerous, I added, a cold dread washing over me. If someone wanted her research or wanted to stop it or acquire the capabilities she possessed. A sudden thought, horrifying and unavoidable, struck me. What if the brain transplant wasn't just a medical last resort for me? What if it was part of their plan? Sarah gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. You mean, they wanted your brain, Jeremiah, in Debbie's body? They knew your body was damaged, and they had Debbie's intact one available, but brain dead, and they orchestrated it. The implications were staggering. If true, my second chance at life was a carefully manipulated outcome, a pawn in a game I didn't even know I was playing. My parents, desperate to save me, might have unknowingly played right into their hands. The next few days, I was a coiled spring. Every shadow seemed to hold a lurking menace. Every unfamiliar car on Debbie's street made my heart race. We decided to try and find the original members of Project Chimera, mentioned in Debbie's notes. It was a long shot, but it was our only lead. One evening, as I was working late in my classroom, sifting through more of Debbie's digital files on her old laptop, the screen flickered. A command prompt appeared, scrolling rapidly with lines of code. I felt a jolt of alarm. Someone was trying to hack in. My instincts, honed by years of tinkering with computers as a teenager, kicked in. I frantically tried to shut down the connection, but it was too fast. A message flashed on the screen, stark and chilling. We know. Then, the screen went black. My heart hammered against my ribs. They knew. Someone was aware of our investigation. They were watching. And they were sending a warning. Fear, cold and sharp, gripped me. This wasn't just a theoretical conspiracy anymore. It was real. And it was targeting me. My very existence, my new life as Deborah Harrison, was suddenly on a very precarious edge. This wasn't just about figuring out who I was anymore. It was about uncovering a truth that might cost me that very life. I wasn't just a substitute teacher. I was now an unwitting participant in a high-stakes game. And the other players had just made their move. The chilling message, we know, burned itself into my mind. The hacker's intrusion wasn't just a warning, it was a confirmation. Our amateur investigation had struck a nerve. The cozy confines of Debbie's classroom, once a sanctuary, now felt like a spotlight. They're watching us, I told Sarah the next day, my voice tight with a fear I hadn't felt since the accident. We met discreetly in a secluded corner of the school library, whispering over a pile of calculus textbooks. Sarah's face was grim. So, my theory about the accident, it's not so wild now, is it? No, I conceded, it's horrifyingly plausible. Project Chimera. That's our lead. We need to know what Debbie was working on and why it was so important that someone would orchestrate a brain transplant to ensure her survival, with my brain as a puppet. The thought was grotesque, but logical. If someone wanted access to Debbie's expertise, her unique mathematical insights into neurological architecture, and my body was conveniently destroyed, while hers was perfectly usable, a swap would be an ideal solution. A controlled experiment, perhaps, with my brain as the unwitting subject. Armed with Debbie's cryptic notes, we began to piece together the fragments of Project Chimera. The algorithms in her files weren't just about consciousness transfer, they were about stabilizing it, about preventing neural degradation during the process, and, most alarmingly, about enhancing cognitive functions post-transplant. Look at this. I pointed to a complex diagram in one of Debbie's notebooks, showing interconnected neural pathways and fluctuating energy signatures. This isn't just about moving a brain. It's about optimizing it. They were trying to create a superior consciousness. Sarah's eyes widened. So you might be more than just Jeremiah in Debbie's body. You might be a modified Jeremiah. The idea sent a shiver down my spine. Had the transplant done more than just relocate my brain? Had it subtly altered me, perhaps even without my full awareness? It explained the strange moments of heightened clarity, the almost effortless recall of complex mathematical concepts, even concepts I hadn't formally studied as Jeremiah but seemed to know as Debbie. It was like I had integrated not just her body, but some aspects of her intellect. The notes also contained a list of names, members of Project Chimera. One name stood out, Dr. Elias Thorne, a brilliant but controversial neuroscientist rumored to have been expelled from several prestigious institutions for unethical research. Thorne was known for his radical theories on consciousness and his belief that the human brain was merely an organic computer that could be upgraded. Thorne, I muttered, the name feeling heavy on my tongue. He's our likely culprit. He would have the means, the motive, and the lack of ethics. We decided our next step was to find Thorne. It wouldn't be easy. A man like that would be deep underground. But Debbie's notes had subtle references, coded addresses, and old contact information. Using her old computer, and with Sarah's surprising knack for digital sleuthing, another unlooked-for ally in this bewildering journey, we managed to triangulate a possible location, a remote, abandoned research facility outside the city. Once a hub for a defunct biotech company. The thought of going there filled me with dread, but a desperate urgency propelled me forward. I had to know the truth. I had to understand what had happened to Jeremiah, and to Debbie, and to me. You can't go alone, Sarah insisted, her face pale. It's too dangerous. You're right, I agreed. But I can't involve my parents. And I can't ask any of my colleagues. You're the only one. Sarah hesitated, then nodded. Okay, but we need a plan. And some way to protect ourselves. Her father being a detective meant she had a surprising amount of practical knowledge. She brought a small, discreet taser, a gift from her dad for self-defense, and a burner phone. The old research facility was a desolate, imposing structure, surrounded by overgrown weeds and a decaying chain-link fence. The windows were boarded up, and the air hung heavy with the scent of damp concrete and decay. It felt like stepping into a horror movie. We entered through a broken window, our flashlights cutting through the oppressive darkness. The facility was a maze of dimly lit corridors, abandoned labs, and dusty equipment. Each creaking floorboard, each scuttling sound, sent a jolt of adrenaline through me. As we moved deeper, we found a hidden sublevel, a discreet elevator tucked behind a false wall. This was it. This was where Project Chimera had been truly active. The sublevel was cleaner, newer, humming with a low, barely audible electricity. Here, the labs were still active, albeit sparsely populated. We found computers, data drives, and medical equipment that hummed with a sinister purpose. And then, in a secure vault-like room, we found it. A series of cryogenic chambers. And within one of them, perfectly preserved, was a body. My breath caught in my throat. It was my body. Jeremiah's body. Intact. Unharmed. Not crushed. Not beyond repair. It was precisely as I remembered it, resting peacefully in suspended animation. I stared at it, a wave of profound disorientation washing over me. But the doctors had told my parents. My body was destroyed. This was an impossible contradiction. Sarah gasped beside me. Jeremiah, they lied to your parents. They told them your body was crushed so they'd agree to the transplant. They wanted your brain for Debbie's body. A cold, bitter rage began to simmer within me. They had manipulated my parents, played on their grief and desperation. They had taken my life, given me a new one, but all under false pretenses. This wasn't a rescue, it was a kidnapping. Then I saw something else. On a nearby console, a series of monitors displayed complex neurological data. And one screen showed a detailed brain scan. Not just any brain scan. My brain scan. But with subtle, highlighted areas, indicating not just transplant but enhancement. Neural pathways fortified, processing speeds optimized. My brain, Jeremiah's brain, was not just moved, it was improved. I was right. I was a modified Jeremiah. They did it, I whispered, the words heavy with revelation. They created a superior consciousness. They didn't just move my brain, they upgraded it. And they wanted to study the results. Suddenly, a voice boomed from the doorway, startling us both. Indeed, Miss Harrison. Or should I say, Jeremiah? Dr. Elias Thorne stood there, a gaunt, intense man with piercing blue eyes and a chillingly calm demeanor. He held a small device, not a weapon, but something that looked like a remote control. Behind him, two burly, silent guards appeared, their faces impassive. I must say, your initiative is impressive, Thorn continued, stepping into the room, his gaze sweeping over the cryogenic chamber with my body. A testament to the efficacy of my methods. The transplanted brain, demonstrating advanced problem-solving skills, curiosity, and even a natural inclination towards investigation. Precisely what we had hoped for. You lied to my parents, I accused, my voice trembling with fury. You told them my body was destroyed. You manipulated them into agreeing to this monstrosity. Thorn merely shrugged, a faint, condescending smile touching his lips. A necessary fabrication, I assure you. Your original body, while perfectly viable, was designated for future research. We needed a subject whose brain was exceptional and whose social disappearance would be easily explained. Deborah Harrison, with her existing expertise in neural mathematics and her convenient death, provided the perfect vessel for your continuation. You killed Debbie. Sarah shrieked, her voice cracking with anger. A regrettable necessity, Thorn replied, completely devoid of emotion. Her brain, while brilliant, was too fixed, too set in its own neural patterns. We needed a blank slate for the full scope of our enhancements, and her body was ideal. Jeremiah's youthful, adaptable brain was the perfect candidate for the next stage of Project Chimera. What next stage? I demanded, my mind racing, trying to find a way out of this impossible situation. Thorn's smile widened, a truly chilling sight. The ability to transfer consciousness from any brain into any suitable vessel, indefinitely, and to optimize that consciousness for specific tasks. We believe your brain, Jeremiah, now fully integrated and subtly enhanced, holds the key to the final breakthrough. Your investigative drive, your raw intelligence, it's all data. And we're going to extract it. He raised the device in his hand. It wasn't a remote, it was a neuroinhibitor. But first, Thorn said, his voice dropping to a low, menacing tone, we must ensure you don't compromise our work any further. It seems we need to recalibrate your understanding of your new purpose. The guards took a step forward. My heart hammered. This wasn't just about identity anymore, it was about my very survival and the dark truth about Project Chimera. The brain that once belonged to Jeremiah, now in Deborah's body, was a prize. And Thorn was coming to collect. The neuroinhibitor in Thorn's hand glowed faintly, casting an ominous light on his triumphant, chilling smile. The two burly guards advanced, their steps heavy and deliberate. My mind, now both Jeremiah's and subtly enhanced by Debbie's neural architecture, raced frantically. Escape. Survival. Exposure. These were the only variables that mattered. Run, Sarah. I hissed, pushing her backward towards a narrow service tunnel I'd noticed earlier, half hidden behind a stack of old crates. Sarah, despite her fear, didn't hesitate. She scrambled into the dark opening as the guards lunged. I knew I couldn't outrun them, not in this unfamiliar body, not with Thorn's device. Instead, I grabbed the nearest heavy object, a discarded piece of lab equipment, and swung it with all my might, aiming for the nearest guard. It connected with a dull thud, buying me precious seconds. Get her. Thorn bellowed, his composure finally cracking into a snarl of frustration. I didn't wait. My eyes darted around the lab, searching for an exit, a weapon, anything. My gaze fell on the main console for the cryogenic chambers. A complex interface, but one that my enhanced brain instinctively understood. You want my brain, Thorn? I yelled, my voice ringing with defiance. Then come and get it. I slammed my hand down on a sequence of buttons, overriding the chamber containing my original body. Alarms blared, a piercing, insistent wail that echoed through the sublevel. The cryogenic fluid began to drain rapidly from the chamber, threatening to thaw my former self. Thorn froze, his eyes widening in a mixture of horror and fury. No, you fool. You'll destroy decades of research. Stop it. He lunged for the console, distracted, giving me the opening I needed. I spun, pulling out the taser Sarah had given me and firing it blindly. It arced through the air, hitting one of the guards squarely in the chest. He convulsed and dropped, momentarily incapacitated. The other guard hesitated, confused by the sudden chaos. Now, Sarah. I screamed, turning and diving into the service tunnel after her. We scrambled through the cramped, dark passage, the blare of the alarms fading behind us. I could hear Thorne's enraged shouts, the thud of the remaining guards' boots. We burst out into the main abandoned section of the facility, gasping for breath. Where do we go? Sarah panted, her face streaked with dirt and fear. Up. I pointed towards a rickety metal staircase leading to the higher levels. We need to get out of here and expose them. As we ascended, my mind worked feverishly. Thorne wanted my enhanced brain. He wanted Project Chimera to succeed. Destroying my old body, or at least threatening it, was the only leverage I had. But it was a gamble. What if he simply decided to terminate the experiment if I proved too troublesome? We reached the ground floor, racing towards the broken window we had used to enter. But as we neared it, Thorne appeared, blocking our path, his face a mask of cold fury. The second guard, recovered, was right behind him. You are a valuable asset, Jeremiah, Thorne said, his voice surprisingly calm now, but expendable if you jeopardize the project. Surrender, and your original body will be preserved, and we can continue our work with minimal interruption. He raised the neuroinhibitor. Resist, and I will simply initiate neural degradation. A swift and painless end to your current consciousness. My heart pounded, but a fierce resolve solidified within me. I was not an asset. I was not an experiment. I was Jeremiah, in Debbie's body, and I would not be controlled. You're not getting my brain, Thorne, I stated, my voice strong, resonating with a defiance that was both Jeremiah's fire and Debbie's quiet strength. And you're not getting away with this. Suddenly, a blinding flash of light erupted from the broken window, followed by the blare of sirens. Police cars, lights flashing, converged on the facility. Sarah's father. She must have called him on the burner phone from the tunnel, explaining everything. Thorne's eyes widened in disbelief and rage. Impossible. How? My dad, Sarah interjected, stepping out from behind me. He knows everything. And he's got a whole task force with him. Thorne snarled, his eyes darting between us and the approaching police. He made a desperate lunge, not for us, but for a hidden escape hatch in the floor. But it was too late. Uniformed officers swarmed into the building, guns drawn. Thorne and his remaining guard were quickly apprehended. Relief, profound and overwhelming, washed over me. We were safe. Project Chimera was exposed. In the aftermath, the full scope of Thorne's heinous project came to light. The cryogenic chamber holding my body, the evidence of brain enhancement, the detailed records of forced consciousness transfers performed on other unwitting subjects, it was all there. Thorne's vision was a terrifying future where consciousness could be bought, sold, and manipulated, an elite few upgrading their minds and discarding their obsolete bodies. My parents were brought to the facility, their faces etched with confusion and raw emotion as they saw my intact original body in the cryogenic chamber. The truth, finally, had to be explained in full. The doctors involved in my transplant, who had been coerced by Thorne, confessed their roles. The legal battle that followed was unprecedented, stretching the boundaries of law and ethics. In the end, Thorne and his conspirators were arrested and charged with a multitude of crimes. Project Chimera was dismantled. My parents, reeling from the betrayal, but also immensely relieved that I was truly alive, embraced me. It was an embrace for Deborah, but with the full knowledge that Jeremiah was within. The question of my identity remained, but with a new clarity. I was no longer just Jeremiah in Debbie's body. Through the ordeal, through the fusion of minds, through the fight for survival, I had become something new. I was Jeremiah, yes, but tempered by Debbie's memories, her grace, her inherent understanding of the feminine experience. And I was enhanced, subtly but undeniably, a testament to Thorne's ambition, now turned to my advantage. I chose to legally remain Deborah Harrison. It was practical, it honored Debbie's memory, and it allowed me to continue the life she had started. But it was my life now. My family and Sarah knew the truth. And that was enough. I continued teaching at Northwood High, still Miss Harrison, but with a newfound depth. The students still saw their math teacher, but now, when I explained an elegant equation, there was a sparkle in my eyes, a blend of Jeremiah's youthful enthusiasm and Debbie's seasoned wisdom. My interactions with Michael, my old best friend, were still tinged with a bittersweet ache, but a quiet understanding passed between us, a shared secret knowledge that now included Sarah. He had seen the police at the facility that day and pieced together fragments of the truth from news reports. He never asked directly, but his eyes held a knowing compassion. Sarah became my closest friend and confidant, my partner in crime and in discovery. She, with her brilliant mind, continued to explore the intersection of science and ethics, inspired by our ordeal. Sometimes, late at night, I would stand before the mirror in Debbie's bedroom, no longer a stranger studying a specimen, but a woman looking at her reflection. The face was Debbie's, the curves were hers, the voice was hers. But the gaze in the eyes, the thoughts behind them, the heart beating in the chest, they were undeniably mine. Jeremiah's. And Deborah's. A seamless, complex, and utterly unique fusion. I mourned the boy I had been, the life that was violently stolen. But I also embraced the woman I had become, the life that was miraculously given. It was a life born from tragedy, shaped by conspiracy, and, ultimately, defined by choice. I was a testament to human resilience, to the blurred lines of identity, and to the extraordinary potential of the human mind. I was Jeremiah Harrison, the math wizard, now living as Deborah Harrison, the math teacher, enhanced, enlightened, and forever changed. The echo of the crash still lingered, but louder now was the song of a new, unforeseen existence, ready to compose its own melody.